Welcome to the Trump Breaking News Network, your daily source for up-to-the-minute Trump news. Join us today and every day. Here's today's news.
This is TBNN.
Mainstream media anchor gets schooled by Vladimir Putin about the chemical weapon attacks in Syria. By Arjun Walia. Just a few years ago, the concept of false flag terrorism was virtually unheard of. We were so consumed by the mainstream media narrative that anything presented against it was criticized, no matter how much evidence surfaced to prove that narrative to be false. Nobody knew of the corruption lying at the heart of politics and major industries, and still, too few people know about it today. That being said, the world is rapidly waking up, so much so that most terrorist attacks, especially the ones occurring in the countries that represent the Western military alliance, cannot really happen anymore without a false flag possibility at least being raised. While mainstream corporate media still opposes this theory when it arises, the same corporate entities running the globe and enforcing a certain way of life on everyone on it, the concept has at least entered the mainstream. The birth of social media sites and independent, alternative media outlets gave the world a new source of information, and one that differed from corporate media. Billions of eyes turned toward sites like Collective Evolution, platforms like WikiLeaks, and people like Edward Snowden. As a result, the human collective became aware of some facts that it had never been presented with before. One of these facts was the occurrence of false flag terrorism, with the clearest example being 9/11. The evidence for false flag terrorism has been presented by countless politicians, military personnel, academics, and more. But despite the staggering amount of research and evidence presented, their voices are never shared in mainstream media. That being said, mainstream media does allow their own anchors to entertain this idea, or at least suggest that the other narrative exists. I think they were essentially left with no choice, as so many people were becoming aware of it and questioning how the biggest media outlets could completely ignore it, as they had been doing for decades. This is evident in the interview below, where popular mainstream media news anchor Megyn Kelly speaks to Vladimir Putin on a number of topics, including the supposed chemical attack that occurred recently in Syria. Putin is one of multiple politicians who has been letting the world know that false flag terrorism exists. Donald Trump is another, raising the issue during the presidential candidate race, where he called out the U.S. government for creating ISIS through funding. Prominent author and Canadian economist Dr. Michelle Chossudovsky, who is the University of Ottawa's Emeritus Professor of Economics, summed up the narrative quite well at the International Conference on the New World Order, which was organized and sponsored by the Perdani Global Peace Foundation. We are dealing with a criminal undertaking at a global level. And there is an ongoing war. It is led by the United States. It may be carried out by a number of proxy countries, which are obeying orders from Washington. The global war on terrorism is a U.S. undertaking, which is fake. It's based on fake premises. It tells us that somehow America and the Western world are going after a fictitious enemy, the Islamic State, when in fact the Islamic State is fully supported and financed by the Western military alliance and America's allies in the Persian Gulf. They say Muslims are terrorists, but it just so happens that terrorists are made in America. They're not the product of Muslim society, and that should be abundantly clear to everyone on this floor. The global war on terrorism is a fabrication, a big lie and a crime against humanity. The interview. There are many takeaways from the interview, but right off the bat Kelly brings up the idea that Russia admitted to Syria using chemical weapons in 2013. Putin is quick to correct her, and always quick to ask where she is getting her information. This happens repeatedly throughout the full version of the interview, especially when it comes to the accusations of alleged Russian hacking in the U.S. elections. The fact that Kelly even entertains the idea of false flag terrorism, although ultimately ridiculing the suggestion, is something that's never been seen in the past, but as explained above, these outlets no longer have any choice but to acknowledge it as a possibility because so many people are becoming aware of it through other information. Another takeaway is the fact that Kelly really tries to ridicule the idea that any of this could have been fake or orchestrated. And Putin gives a blunt response, the answer is very simple and you know it, Yes, could have been used by someone but not by Assad. It could have been used by someone in order to accuse President Assad. So, we have to understand who is to blame, otherwise if there is no true investigation it's only going to play in the hands of those who orchestrated it. You can refer to the articles below for more information and for sources for the information mentioned above. The interview is below that. Assad says Syria chemical attack was fabricated by the US. That they are hand in glove with terrorists. Putin, the chemical attack in Syria was a false flag and more are being prepared in Syria. Assad's top political advisor says US missile strike killed the people fighting terrorists. Putin calls out the powers that be and the imaginary and mythical threats they use to control the US. False flag terrorism, a history of lies and deception explained in a 16-minute video. Evidence shows the Pentagon trained Syria's al-Qaeda rebels in the use of chemical weapons. Pentagon paid PR firm over $500 million to create fake terrorist videos.
That's the news. Join us here every day. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell. See you next time.
This is TBNN.